Project Cars, you've been working on it for a long time. How would you describe the game with one word? You only had one word.
Visceral.
Visceral. That's what you're going for, right? In there, kind of in the moment.
It's that intensity of the experience, that grabbing you, that making it an organic, more than just bits and bytes, that's immersing you and making you lose yourself in it. Yeah.
Cool. All right. The Cars part of Project Cars stands for what stood for Community Assisted Racing
Simulator.
How much, over the span of development, how much did the community feedback eventually factor into it? I mean, was it, to what degree were you guys implementing the kind of community into everything?
Well, the community was involved in many aspects of the game, and the value that they brought to the table is huge, because we've done games the traditional way. This is, I think, our 8th release title, and before that, all our games were done the traditional way, where you develop it like all by yourself, and then you release the game. And for the first time, you hear what people out there think of it. Okay, you may do a demo sometimes a few months before you release, but in this aspect, the community had not only input in some of the design aspects of the game, but more on aspects like how it plays, how it feels. Here's an example. Because our community is all over the world, we inevitably have people that are close to some of the racetracks that we have.
Yes.
And it's great, because for them it's their local racetrack, so they're very passionate about it. So so as soon as we release, the first version of the track in a build, they're like, no, this is not.
I live by Donington, that's not there.
That needs to change. So they have helped us to get that authenticity that I was speaking to earlier on the tracks and the visual detail and stuff. And many of the guys that we have involved in the community are actual, they do like track days and stuff. So they've driven these tracks. I mean, we have professional race drivers on board, but there are many tracks in the game that some of those guys have never raced on. So it's great. Then you have somebody who's done it a lot on that specific track, who does regular track days, and then he would give us feedback on that. Same with the cars. We have many road cars in the game as well, good few road cars, and then the guys would give feedback on that because they've driven that, they own that car, they do track days in it, and so same on the audio, and then of course general concepts is we would implement a certain design aspect, thinking this was great, and then once the guys are out there playing it, then it turns out that it needs some tweaking or adjusting, whatever. So on all of those levels, the community was very much involved, and it helped tremendously. The game would definitely not be anywhere near what it is today without the involvement of the community.
And I mean, I think that must be completely just so valuable having them on, like you said, every aspect, especially that point of people actually doing track days on their own track. I personally go and do annual track days at Kailami. And you get fiercely kind of defensive of your own place. That tree wouldn't be there, that wouldn't be there.
That's my brake marker. You didn't even put in my brake marker.
No, exactly right. I think that's where that little kind of those small aspects come in. You're actually completely right. What kind of racing games and things did you grow up with? That were you a gamer as a child as well? Did you kind of grow up with it at all?
Back then it was the Atari VCS.
In the early days.
It was Asteroids and Pac-Man, and the graphics looked terrible compared to the arcades, and the arcades looked terrible.
So like over time, as these racing games started coming in, I mean, I think of some of my oldest experiences with the original Test Drive games, where you had a Testarossa and that's all, and a Countach. Did you play anything, especially sim-wise, from young? Did anything kind of make its way into your life that inspired you going forwards, and that maybe made its way into this?
Absolutely. The first racing games that I was exposed to was in arcades back then. Of course, PCs and Commodore and stuff was absolutely crap compared to what. This was an era when the arcades were amazing. It was just like, can you imagine one day if we could have these sort of graphics at home? So it was like incredible. Sega did a game based on the Le Mans, that was like still sprite scaling and stuff like that. It didn't have polygons and stuff. And it was so incredible. I was standing and watching it, and it was just like, this is amazing. But I barely played, barely touched it. I think I played it once. It was just like, I'd stand it. Because I
had that impact on
I had this thing from when I was little, and I started seeing these games appear in the cafes and in the arcades and stuff, is I would try to figure out how they work. Like, trying to imagine, how is this working? Why is that thing moving across the screen? And how does it, before I understood about coding and stuff like that, so I've always had this analytical aspect towards it, which has helped me a lot in the games. But anyway, so I used to do a lot of times, spend a lot of time just staring at these games. Then came Sega again with Virtual Racer. Virtual Racing.
Yeah, and that was a big moment.
That was the very first polygon. No textures, just flat shaded polygon.
And you could sit in the hole. You could sit like inside like a Formula One car.
Exactly. I was completely blown away. I was like, this is the most incredible thing ever. One day, I'm gonna have one of these in my house. I was just like, this is
gonna happen.
But you know what happened at that point in time? I remember playing that game. And I remember so well, one of the tracks in it was sort of like a rip-off of Suzuka.
Yes, I remember. It
Because
had the big,
exactly, it had the Ferris wheel thing. And I used to think, imagine, this was like back then there weren't any of these concepts in gaming yet, but I had this idea that, imagine, this was like an open world thing, where you could pull into the pits, get out of the car, walk around, get on the Ferris wheel, ride the Ferris wheel, watch the
racing.
Exactly. I was like, that's going to be the future. This is where games have to start going.
Yeah. Confirmed for Project Cars 2. Ferris wheels, virtual reality Ferris wheel rides.
So that game truly inspired me in many ways, and as far as vision of where this could go, but also in just what's possible when you start dealing with polygons and stuff. Yeah. Now, that game was horrendously expensive. Sega spent a lot of money on the hardware for that, because it was military grade flight sim hardware.
Yeah, and it even I remember. Do you remember it would even push you if you sat in the big phone, or it would push you to simulate G-forces?
Yeah.
Like that's a lot.
That was way ahead of their time. Yeah. And then of course. Who was it? Namco came out with a little game called Ridge Racer in arcade.
I remember that little game.
It was the first one that had textures on the polygons.
Yes. And a 6-speed gear shifter, or a 4-speed. I remember it actually had like a gear shifter on it.
And it was completely arcadish. Of course, you would just like drift crazy.
Slide everywhere.
But it was just like... So games like that seriously got me into
the arcade really was a big aspect.
Exactly, because you got an impression of where this could go. Even though that wasn't it, it gave you enough of a vision of what's possible. And then, of course, back then on the home PCs, on the Commodore 64, we were playing Revs and Grand Prix 2.
I was so hoping you were going to say Grand Prix 2. Jeff Crammond's there.
Grand Prix 2 was huge. Grand Prix 2 was the home racing game that I spent so much time on it, and I think I still have my manual for the box that came with this.
The Jeff Crammond, I think it was like a green. What color was it? Yellow. It was like a yellow.
It was yellow text. The photo of the Formula One car.
Yeah, I mean, when I wrote that question, I thought, please tell me play GP2, because that also had such a profound effect. That is the first time I used to spend 5 hours a day just on Monaco. And I would just tweak, and change my gear shift, and then I'd get like tenth of a second because I just changed my gear, like my fifth gear or something like that. And you're like, yes, and people are just like, you're crazy.
Yeah, you've lost it.
Yeah, okay.
But they don't have tools for that. But Grand Prix 2 was huge for me.
Yeah,
Revs was impressive.
I never played Revs.
But I don't think I ever played more than a single lap on the track because I just completely lost it. It was just... It was infuriatingly difficult, and the graphics were so primitive you could barely see where you were going.
Yeah.
But Grand Prix 2 did it for me. I was just
it was
lost
like
on it. Yeah.
And I think it was pre the EA F1 games.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't really any solid F1 games at that.
No, nothing.
Yeah. No. All right. Is there anything that you really wished you could have kind of squeezed into Project Cars that just wasn't doable yet, or something that kind of was just couldn't get in there or something like that? I'm sure you guys have. I'm sure you got a whole board full of things you want to do.
there are certain things that just fell out of scope, as in it's technically possible now, but we're just out of time.
Yeah, you can't develop forever.
Yeah. Then there are things that we just don't have the technology for yet at this point in time, whether it be computing power and I mean the detail that we have, honestly, in my opinion, and it's clearly shared by many people who's played the game and who are familiar with, like yourself, with tire physics and so on. We have the most complex tire model and suspension physics and so forth that there is at this point in time.
Wow.
Ben Collins, for example, who's worked very closely with us, and some of the other guys like Nick Hamilton stuff, they're convinced it's as good, if not better, than some of the very expensive commercial simulators that they race on.
Wow, fantastic.
So that is incredible. And
so in terms of that stuff, you're kind of featured up.
But the thing is, there's still so much
like
room for improvement, things that we can add that could just make it so much better.
Yeah.
You know that. And then there are aspects that we couldn't get in because it's features that would not be used enough to justify the expense that it would be. Exactly. So it's a tough thing, but if you just want to talk feature-wise, there are a bunch of stuff. I wouldn't even be able to pick one out and say that's
the one that got away, kind of thing.
Yeah, there are a good number of features that we would have loved to have in the game that was just we would still be developing for the next few years if we did that as well. So
okay. Right.
So, but one of the aspects for me personally that's a big thing is because I do all the replay cameras and stuff in the game as well. So when you watch replays, all the cameras and stuff, that's my area. I set all that up. And our replay system is well due for a proper upgrade. So that's something we hope to get in time for the initial release of Project Cars.
Do you actually watch footage of coverage of those tracks and things to kind of get the exact same positioning as the broadcast coverage?
Sometimes it's not possible because of technical reasons. For example, in real life, you don't have to worry about the frame rate dipping. If your camera shows the whole track and 50 cars.
Yeah.
In the game, at this point in time, it doesn't work like that. So sometimes I have to zoom in an area, otherwise there's just too much activity and the frame rate dips.
Wow, okay, that's actually really interesting.
So it's details like that you have to consider when you're setting up these cameras. But I did try, I watched races on the actual tracks from different motorsports and tried to get authentic cameras as well. So to go in with all authentic.
Interesting.
So, but I wanted to have a much better replay camera system done for Project Cars, but it just fell out of scope.
Okay, that's something so many people don't even think about. Like, it doesn't even exist as people. It's like a replay system. Exactly. How much goes into it. When it comes to you, there's obviously a few big kind of names missing from your licenses and stuff in the game.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about the frustrations there, and maybe things that you might run into where.
Well, it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I can assume. What kind of challenges could I say do you run into when looking at things like licensing these guys and stuff?
There are typically two major reasons why a license doesn't work out. It's either prohibitively expensive, like some companies just ask ridiculous amount of money, and it's just outside. People forget this because Project Cars have been in the limelight, and so many people know about it, and it does look great, and the reviews are saying it's better than like Forza and Gran Turismo and stuff. It's an indie game,
you guys kind of kickstarted almost like
we did it by crowdfunding before something like Kickstarter existed.
Yeah, this is like a
and so this is basically a game made by an indie developer. And people
backed by a
that.
Community,
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so we didn't have the funds to just go and pay crazy money for just to have it, And
do some people offer them kind of free of charge and others charge for them? How does that work? Like, do you have someone like Toyota saying, "Take our stuff"?
I'll tell you what. Traditionally, if you wanted a car in a racing game, you paid for it. In my mind, that's completely wrong. It is advertising for the manufacturers, and it should be the other way. They should be paying us.
I agree with that.
Now, I think we're seeing a shift in that way, in that direction, because after Project Cars got to the point of where it got good, and there were many people out there playing the game who was involved in the community, we started getting, and of course when these pro race drivers and guys like Ben Collins were talking about in interviews just randomly about how great the game is, we started getting approached by manufacturers, more not so well-known manufacturers and so, but they would come out and offer us a free license.
Okay, so yes, that does kind of happen. I mean,
so it's starting to happen, and I think at some point it is going to go the other way, that people would say, you want your car in this game, you pay for it.
Yes, no, exactly. It's like we're going to leave you out, not the other way around.
Exactly, yeah.
But I can understand, you got someone, let's say Hyundai or something, want to make themselves more like, they want to be seen more as a sporty brand, so they're going to say, "Can we put our car in the game?"
Exactly.
Ferrari's going to sit back and go like, "We're Ferrari." Like,
Yeah, you pay us.
like who we are cars and racing.
Exactly, and Ferrari is one of those that are just, for us as an indie developer at this point in time, just prohibitively expensive.
Yeah.
We did a Ferrari racing game under contract, Test Drive Ferrari.
Yes.
Which unfortunately was a bit of a stillborn.
Yeah.
It had huge potential, but the publisher didn't want to spend more money on QAing and stuff, so it was released very buggy, unpolished and stuff, which was really sad and frustrating, because it was like a very big passion for me to get that game right. But anyway, then you have other brands that are exclusively licensed to specific manufacturers, Porsche and
Porsche and EA and all that stuff.
And then you stuff, Now you have to pay the license for it, and you have to pay them.
Yes, I mean,
and then it's just like, forget it.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember
say no.
Forza did that Porsche pack. They must have struck something. Who knows what the hell they did?
Yeah,
to
when
do
we
that,
did we did a Ferrari pack for Shift, the first one, and I had to pay stupid money for that, because
really? Yes, just to get it from whoever's squatting on it, basically.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's frustrating. So, unfortunately, it's not an equal playing field out there. Everybody is just willing to license their cars for a fit. And the same as with racing tracks.
Yeah.
Some racing tracks, there are a few key racing tracks in the world that we wanted in the game that we don't have, simply because they were ridiculous with the license fees.
Really? Yeah? So they charge kind of to use their likeness, and that's like the whole license.
And then they often do it per year.
Oh, really?
Wow. Or per title, that's it. You can use it in Project Cars now, and then they would say, but you have to pay this annually, or you can use it in Project Cars, and the next game you have to license it again. And then it's crazy money.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And you got your big names and things out there, so they they're like Ferrari. They're like, hey, we're this track. Like, who are you without us, kind of thing, So these days, especially, people demanding, they want Nürburgring, they want this, they want that.
So we were very chuffed that we got North Life.
So that's great.
And we have amazing racing tracks. I don't think it detracts in any form or fashion from the game. And we have some amazing fantasy tracks. Now, it may sound like a silly thing, but I was very much involved in the design of these fantasy tracks. Yeah. And my design approach with them is always to take like highlights from either like a similarity to, of like, for example, a corkscrew or something, or your rouge or something, and they do something similar in areas of the track, like combos like that, or the style of track that typically works well, a chicane followed by
this or that, like a combination that works
exactly.
out.
So, and then of course scenery. Once you do a fantasy track, you can do cool scenery. Now, obviously, we still want to have it authentic. So, if somebody is not like you and I are petrol heads, they wouldn't know it's not a real world track. They would go play it in the game, and for all intents and purposes, it would look as real and believable as Spa.
Yes.
So we've done that, and there are a few in the game, very few. We have very few fantasy tracks, but the ones that are there are very authentic and great fun. And it's so cool to have that feedback from guys who's playing the game now and saying, "Oh, that's my favorite track in the game," and it's like,
that's cool.
It's one of the fantasy. It's a track we made up.
That must be so. I would love to do something like design a track. I mean, then get awesome, to kind of even drive it. And things. When we were, when I was a kid in school, you used to sit with your pencil, draw out the layouts and everything.
Build Sky Electric stuff, and it's like, let's try this and
exactly, that's great.
So it's cool to be able to be involved in that.
That's great. Okay, kind of moving towards wrapping up. What kind of motorsports do you enjoy that you actively watch and things? As a petrol head now, are there any kind of series that you actively kind of stick to and watch these days? As a fan,
I used to watch Formula One religiously.
Yeah.
And I stopped for one core reason. I couldn't justify the time anymore to do it. When you develop a title like this, especially during the ramp-up time and when you're fully bursting on getting it done and stuff, it's typically 14, 15 hour a day, seven days a week work for a year.
Wow.
So it's insane, and you simply do not have, and then the very little time that you do have for yourself, you have a family and you have, other stuff that's more important. So then I end up just watching highlights on YouTube and stuff like that. You just get to a point where
you can't even afford the 2 hours for a race kind of thing.
No, you can't. You can't. So I just end up watching the highlights. I still watch it, but then I'll just go watch the highlights on YouTube or whatever.
Yes.
And but I love GT racing, GT style racing, like the FIA GT3 and GT1 series. I love British Touring Car Challenge, touring saloon car racing. And you're talking about Kyalami. When I was a little boy, 4 years old, we used to live up here in Pretoria, and my dad would take me to Kyalami. And back then, the way they did it was, that was when Dave, John Love and Dave Charlton and those guys were still racing, early 70s and stuff. And it's such an incredible experience, and motorsport just gets under your skin, and it's like once that you get that, it's just, you just love motorsport.
Gets in your blood.
Exactly. And back then it was crazy because they would open the track before the main race, and then people would go on there with their cars. It's like, it wasn't like organized track day like now. People they'd just open the gates and people would just drive on and they would race.
Wow.
It was crazy. And then people, and then they would have like a special event, and guys would get on there with tractors or combis.
Wow.
And then it would have like races, and then it was stuff, and then now everybody get off the track, and then the main race would start, and it's like Formula One.
Oh my goodness,
it was crazy. It was crazy days, and it was so cool.
Yeah, and and a lot of that is lost these days.
It is.
Right?
It's gone. Yeah, you don't have that vibe anymore.
Motor racing is struggling these days. Broadcasted motor racing, that's numbers are dwindling as well. Okay. All right, cool. I'm going to end this with a quick bonus round. So these are going to be quick answers. Okay. This is fun stuff for you personally. All right. Naturally aspirated or turbo?
Naturally.
Okay. German or Japanese?
Sound of a turbo kicking in.
It is good. German or Japanese?
German.
Okay. Favorite racing driver?
Schumi.
Okay. Favorite racing series of all time?
All time. Probably Formula One.
Okay. Favorite track?
It changes.
Favorite track today?
At one point in time, it was absolutely, I loved Spa. I would just lap Spa over and over and over. But
I'm right there with you on that.
But it changes. I love the Nordschleife. I think it's an incredible, the full thing.
The full thing, or the Nordschleife,
Hockenheim, historically speaking, the original Hockenheim before they changed it.
Yeah, the long one.
The long one running through the forest there. That was so well done in GP2.
Yeah. Can you guys please recreate that for us? DLC, thank you.
Watch this space.
Yeah, because, I was actually watching a Hockenheim race the other day, and I thought, man, no one, I need, I wish someone would go back and make us the old tracks, because when I played games when those tracks existed, they were like Mega Drive Ayrton Senna games where, it didn't even look like the track. We need those now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and it's like, that's what I'm saying. GP2 and GP3 had it pretty good, but then the track changed.
Yes, the new one. And I do like the new layout, but the old one was also just something very unique.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. Okay, your dream driving road and car. So I can give you any road and any car in the world to go take a drive on tomorrow. Where are you going and what are you driving?
I would have said, the Ferrari 458, but I've driven that already, so that won't count.
No, it can count if you want to get back into it.
I would not. You know what I would do? I would scale back. I would love to take the Cayman GT4.
Okay.
And drive it on the road from Gordons Bay to Royals, one of the most incredibly scenic drives in the world. I've done it on my motorbike a few times, and it is phenomenal. So. That would be good. Although that's a slow drive. If I had to bring speed into it.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's that balance between you enjoy the curves rather than just flooring it.
Exactly.
Somewhere,
It's just like going straight in a straight line. There's not much. Much thrill in that. But we have some incredible roads in the Western Cape. They're up in the mountains and stuff. It's just phenomenal. So I wouldn't even go exotic and
go somewhere else.
Yeah, I've done the the south coast of France and those areas.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, and it's nice, but there's so much traffic.
Really? Yeah.
And
there's some good stuff right here.
Yeah, and we have easily up to that. And
Really?
that road that I just mentioned, the one going from Gordons Bay to Royals, is rated as one of the most scenic and incredible drives in the world.